Welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast, where I, your host, Xavier Cruz, a lifelong wrestling fan, will take a lifelong friend through the action, the joys, and the drama of the world of professional wrestling. My co-host, Kelsey Silva, has been bitten by the wrestling bug, and I want to invite you to join us as I take her through the moments that made me a fan. So if you're new to wrestling and would like to get brought up to speed, or a fan who would like to relive some classic matches, promos, and segments through fresh eyes, join us as we embark on a journey through the Attitude Era and beyond. Welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the New to Wrestling podcast. This week, we watched the July 8th, 1996 edition of Monday Night Raw. My name is Xavier Cruz, and I am joined, as always, by the lovely Kelsey Silva. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? That was great. That's crazy.
One more time.
That match was crazy. I'm sorry. I'm still in a state of shock.
Oh, we're still reeling. Okay, so this week on the card, we had the Ultimate Warrior versus Owen Hart. We had Justin Hawk Bradshaw versus Salvio Vega, and we had Vader and the British Bulldog versus the Godwin brothers. So this week started out weird because it had an announcement about the suspension of the Ultimate Warrior, like from the top of the show, which is not a traditional way to kind of start an episode. And then we go into kind of the first match, which is the Ultimate Warrior and Owen Hart. So this was your first experience with the Ultimate Warrior. I just kind of want to get your first take on this man. I have my opinions on the Ultimate Warrior, but I kind of just want to hear what you experiencing him for the first time kind of got from him.
So, okay, wait. My first question was when we were watching, I was like, wait, was that legit? He actually, that wasn't a bit. He legitimately got suspended because he was not showing up for matches.
Correct. So what my assumption is that and I'll go into what happened after the match and kind of why they did that. So he just straight up no showed events that he was supposed to be at. So
Crazy.
They probably let him wrestle because he was scheduled to be on on television. So instead of not having the match at all or having to do a last minute substitution, they just let him kind of do the match. And then if you notice afterwards that he got attacked by all of them, and that's going to subsequently write him off of television for the time being until his suspension gets kind of dealt with, if that makes sense, because you can't just not show up to your job and there not be consequences. So that was kind of their way of kind of getting him put on the sidelines, as he got attacked so viciously that he was injured, but essentially
he's benched.
Yeah, essentially he's just suspended. So that's how they kind of did it for TV.
Wow. And he has to pay a fine. Is that what
correct.
they said?
Essentially, yeah. It's basically you didn't hold up your end of your contract. So here you have to pay a fine before you can come back and be a regularly scheduled wrestler, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. Because at this time, there's another wrestling company called WCW, or World Championship Wrestling, which is kind of stirring the pot as far as making offers to wrestlers of the WWF. The WCW has had a lot of it was backed by Turner Broadcasting, essentially, which at the time was television as far as money goes. So they were offered a bunch of money, and so there's lots of this kind of happens more than you'd think, where guys don't show, or guys just kind of are on one program one week and then all of a sudden on a different program the next week. So it's kind of wild. And this is the beginning of WCW kind of this time period is the beginning of them kind of really taking off, because you don't know, but there's two wrestlers that were on WWF called Razor Ramon and Diesel, both of which have had feuds and are friends with Shawn Michaels in real life. But they were kind of the first to jump ship and go to the other company. And it's right around this time that they start being really heavily presented on the other show. Big T. There's lots of drama regarding that.
Oh my God, so much.
Yeah, exactly. But I did want to like, what is your first impression of seeing the Ultimate Warrior? Because he is a lot.
Something.
He is
He is like bronze. He's so bronze, and
so
that's
tan.
definitely got to be a spray tan and not like a bed tan. Like it's got to because it's like just not even a natural color. Like I was just like, what?
No,
I was like, is he?
he's
I asked. I was like, is he painted or like? But he's literally just like bronze. Like
no
he's
for
so dark.
at first I thought you were referring to his face paint, and I was like,
Well, duh.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, but then I was like, oh no, no, he's that color generally when he
Well,
wrestles.
his energy's so frenetic.
Oh, chaos. He is
It,
chaos personified.
it's giving a lot of
It's a lot. Period.
yes, he's a lot. And like I don't know, I couldn't like understand his like if you want to say it, like his brand. Like I was like, well, I don't like where does the ult and I guess like because I'm also just jumping in, like
Not
the Ultimate
necessarily.
Warrior, like I'm like it's just very confused imagery. Like the Ultimate Warrior, like you have some sort of vision in your head and it like wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. And he was just like again that like chaos
Oh,
energy.
and I wish I could say that like listening to his like promos or something would help you. But it's he is known for not making any sense and for being like borderline just like belligerent with words. Like none of like there's
That
never
would make
really
sense to
a
me.
point he's just kind of rambling and you're just kind of on board because he's kind of just yelling at you, you know what I mean? He's kind of one of the last kind of like staples of like the 80s. He was huge in the 80s.
Okay.
Like and you can kind of like tell because he's just very like with the like the fringe and the super bright colors and the just kind of like manic energy. So
It
like
yeah.
my and it may be that I was like spoiled because I started watching wrestling in the era of like the Owen Harts and Shawn Michaels and like where they're just more athletic and more technically like sound. But I have a tough time watching Ultimate Warrior matches because he's just so large and he's just very limited as far as like his in-ring like ability. Um
Yeah. It was like watching someone wrestle on bath salts. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like it was like he seemed like not okay. Like and I was like, I don't it just I didn't get it. Like I was just like, I don't really understand what's happening here. What is it was just a lot of like and heavy breathing, jogging in place. I was like, this man, I don't know, is he gonna eat this other his face? Very confusing.
yeah, and like it was really like such a I was intrigued mostly because of the contrast in styles because he's so just like, you know, he's like a strong man and like he's just very kind of like lumbering
Mm-hmm.
whereas Owen Hart is very technical and
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of a term I wanted to like go over where it's called like selling, and Owen Hart does a really good job of making the Ultimate Warrior look like stronger than he is, or you know what I mean, because
Mm.
he can the way that
Yeah.
he like receives the moves is so good that it kind of like amplifies whatever the Ultimate Warrior does. Whereas on the contrast of that, I don't know if you remember, but the Ultimate Warrior was receiving a bunch of moves in a row from Owen and just like not feeling it, or like, you know, he just kept getting
Right.
like back up and that's like it's like no selling, which is just kind of like annoying because like
Yeah.
you're supposed to be like telling a story and like you're supposed to be like in this like battle and like you can't just like put aside your ego for 2 seconds and like make you not look good for like make the other guy look good, you know, you have to like be like, oh, I'm so much stronger than you that whatever you do like doesn't matter. It's just
I
like
just gotta slow jog it out and I'm fine.
exactly.
And I was
And like,
like,
you know, just really like just violently like shake the ropes. Like it I like can respect it in terms of like 80s wrestling. But like when you put it next to like what is coming, it's just like ugh. You haven't like experienced like a ton of what's coming because we're still very early on as far as like the transition, but it gets frustrating watching him. But that's just my personal opinion.
and
I
it
know there
was
are a lot of people that like love him. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
not a diss on him. It was just like so different. And then it was funny, like when you said, now that you're talking about selling, when he was doing that, where he was just like getting back up again and like jogging it out. And then it was almost like he remembered like he probably should be. So like the last time he like got, oh, sorry. The last time he got up and he was like jogging and then he was like, and then he kind of like pretended that
Right.
suddenly it was hitting him, but it almost like you saw his like brain like click in where I was like, oh, I should actually probably like pretend I'm a little more
Do
worn
this right
out.
now.
And
Right.
then I think McMahon, right, is one of the narrators or the
Yeah, he's one of the
commentators.
commentators, yeah.
He was like, oh no, I think he's feeling it now. Or he like said
Yeah.
something and I was like, okay. Like I just
Right, exactly.
it was interesting. It was interesting.
And then it ended in a disqualification where the whole Cornette camp. This was a very Cornette camp heavy episode.
Yes.
But they all came out and like attacked him and
It was
he's done.
giving the Camp Rock part where they like come out and they like Camp Rock, like Camp Cornette.
So yeah, so then they like wrote him off of television, so we're not going to see him for a little bit. All right, so the next match we saw was Justin Hawk Bradshaw versus Salvio Vega. Bradshaw is going to go through many transformations as far as his like career goes.
The Hawk?
Yes.
Okay,
So
word.
just kind of a tidbit, he doesn't go anywhere. He becomes very much so like a staple of WWE programming from like
Fabulous.
here on out.
Because I loved him.
Yeah, you're seeing very much like the early like stages where it's all very like rooted. All of his like future characters or iterations are very much rooted in like this like super tough like Texas man.
Okay.
But I did what like stood out to me in this match was, I mean, besides the fact that his ass cheek was out for like 10 minutes of the match before he did anything about it. I was like, sir, do you not feel that at all?
That is a lot of cheek. A lot of meat was out.
Yeah,
who is paying for all this meat?
That's what I'm saying. I was like, for free?
For free?
Like, in front of my salad? Like I was at a loss for words. I was just like, there's no way you don't know that that's happening.
Which he tried to get through it, I think. And then because we were so focused on it, we both saw when he did the subtle like wedgie film, we were like, oh, there it is. Okay.
No, because it was so distracting because he's such a big man.
He's so big.
It was just like a fucking just like prime cut of beef. Just like
I swear, medium rare with the thigh, dark meat. Oh my god. It was a lot. But it was, and I wasn't upset. If he didn't fix it, I wouldn't have been mad.
And then we saw a very like different kind of manager in contrast to like Jim Cornette, who's like this very vocal, over the top.
He's literally a racket. Like he has a tennis racket,
he is a racket.
Yeah.
But we had Zeb on the side. Zebekiah was his full name, as I learned today. I had not even an iota of an idea that was even a name. So and he's just that is a character of a man. Like we described at least, I want to say like 3 like cartoons like to describe this man. Like we pulled out the prospector from Toy Story,
Doug Dimmadome,
Yosemite Sam, like it was. And like the thing is, he didn't really do that much up until like the end. But his like he was just so distracting because his hat was just so tall. You were like,
I don't know, he's giving like the higher the hat, the closer to God.
And like he was just so distracting. And then at the end, he just comes out with like a branding iron, which like who
out
knew?
Of the blue, I was like, is he carrying a cane? Like, what is that? It's so weird. And then I was like, oh my god, it's like a cattle branding thing.
Yeah, and like my thing is like, there's no fire. Like, what do you like? Like, unless you're gonna like actually like swing it at people, like. I don't get it.
Using messaging, I said, I was like, it just is like, don't you have a spittoon to go spit in? I don't know. It's very
fully like, but I want the like the cartoonish like
yeah, 100%. And then it like turns on its thing. Yeah.
But that was a pretty good match. I mean, I don't know much about Salvio Vega other than he brings in Lita, who you will like come to know and love.
Okay.
But other than that, he doesn't have that big of an impact, or like I don't, but I was pleasantly surprised because he like really pulled out the stops in this one. It was like it was like the longest match on the card, I'm pretty sure. Like it went through
Yeah.
like multiple commercial breaks. So they were like really going at it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, like as far as like star power goes, lacking. Because like
Yes.
Bradshaw is not the star he's going to be yet. He's very much just a cowboy right now. But you'll see him transform into some. He is like one of the hardest hitting wrestlers on the roster. Period. That man will like literally slap you out of your shoes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so
What any girl dreams.
um
Mm.
all right, so the last match was Vader and the British Bulldog versus the Godwin brothers, which was also another chaotic
So,
mess. um we really saw the Godwin brothers for the first time, like as far as like we're concerned. We
yeah.
saw like them in segments previously, but this was the first time we actually like saw them wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
um and like what stood out to me is like Henry Godwin was a far better wrestler than Phineas.
Was he
Um,
the red shirt one or the?
Phineas was the red shirt one.
Yeah.
Um, but and Henry was the one who like was like manhandling Vader, which is not easy to do because he's 400 pounds.
Every
Like,
time he did it, I was like, "Oh my god! Oh my god!"
he like suplexes him, and I thought he was gonna like snap his own back in half. And
Yep.
I was like, this man is huge, and
Mm-hmm.
like he was matching up quite nicely. And then I like what you said while we were watching about the juxtaposition of the British Bulldog versus these like just like two hillbilly-esque characters, because
Yep.
he's such a like refined like British wrestler.
Yeah.
um
Clean.
yeah, like well
Everything shaved.
manicured, right? Like slick,
Slick.
like like he looks like he could like transition into like Olympic diving like tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Yes,
um
100%.
but I also find like Camp Cornette like a weird team, like
So weird.
because like I in my head I was like the British Bulldog and Owen Hart like make sense, they're literally like brother-in-law. But like Vader, like I just like this jigsaw puzzle doesn't like quite fit. But
No.
like for some reason they just keep trying to make it work, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's
and,
odd.
and I think they just have Jim Cornette just like yell over everything in the hopes that like it looks like a cohesive unit. But it really just ends up most of the time that they are like presented on television, they're doing things where like they're constantly like miscommunicating and like end up hitting each other. Like in the match, like the British Bulldog like ended up doing like a splash on Vader. uh,
Yes.
and stuff like that happens constantly with them. It's like just like the village idiots like just cannot get it straight, and like their leader is just like having like an apoplectic like seizure like on the side at all times. This man went from like doing commentary to like banging on the apron to like interfering like in the match. He like grabbed the referee's leg at one point, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Sir, are you okay?" Because like you're doing a lot.
A lot.
And all of this is like leading up to like the pay-per-view. It's like In Your House is like the name of a lot of pay-per-views coming up. In Your House is like I guess like a series of pay-per-views.
Mm.
um but they kept cutting like throughout the episode to Shawn Michaels and Ahmed Johnson kind of like teasing their like partner who's going to team with them to face Camp Cornette at this pay-per-view. And like the entire time they just keep like cutting to them in like the middle of matches, which is something they do a lot during this time period, which I find
Mm.
is like weird. Like they like actually like took a phone call from
Mr. Perfect.
yeah, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennings, who's like another wrestler, but like it was just like, why are you answering the phone in the middle of a match? Like it
Yeah.
because like it was awkward because they like are on the phone and then go to commercial break and then they come back and they're no longer on the phone.
They're like, we lost him. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, we're just like, oh, okay. He's like cell phone signals, crazy. And we're like, Okay, 1996. Like,
No swear.
and then they finally get to the last segment, or the last time that they kind of go back to Shawn Michaels and Ahmed Johnson, and they introduce who their partner is going to be, who is Psycho Sid. And your expression was just priceless, as far as just like mouth agape, just like listening to this man. So what were your like impressions on Psycho Sid?
Whoa. Okay, so like it's a testament to how good he is, because I obviously have no idea who this person is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like terrified. I was like, this is like this man is scary. Like, and I didn't even realize his name was Psycho Sid. I actually wrote down like what is his actual wrestling name, because I missed that part.
Gotcha.
But that tracks, makes total sense. I was like I was afraid, and like obviously like I'm just like, oh, it got me hype. I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. Like, this is great. They literally busted some guy out of the freaking loony bin who's enormous. And I was like, okay, wait, if Shawn Michaels and Ahmed are so big, and then this man is like towering over them, like Shawn Michaels was like peeping up over his shoulder, and I was like, this man has to be like 7 feet tall, and he's just
Yes.
neck. He's like straight neck with the bleach blonde hair. I was like, I am so scared, and he's sweating profusely for no reason. He literally just got out of the car. Like, what? I was like, I'm so scared of
Oh,
this man.
absolutely. And like you like his promo goes into like he's like they're like shouting for help, and then he just keeps repeating like nobody's there, like nobody's there, and I'm like, I'm
Like,
uncomfortable.
it's triggering me. Like, it's like I'm like, this, these are the things I say to myself, but you don't need to say them out loud. Like,
Well,
what do
no,
you
fully. You Why are you attacking me with this like violence?
Yeah, like,
Um,
please.
and then of course Jim Cornette does what Jim Cornette does, which is absolutely like shit the bed. He like
Yep.
he just like starts losing his mind. Well, and understandably so, because like this man is, as he is huge. Like he is a very large dude. And he's also like ripped, like just nuts.
Beef.
And he's been around before. It's been a minute since he's been like on television. I'm excited for you to kind of get a taste of who he is. Because he is just another kind of character in the same vein of like where mankind is kind of like, you're unsure if he's like going to do more hurt to himself or like other people.
Mm.
Whereas like Psycho Sid is like crazy, like that man has definitely like killed before. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
with
And like you
purpose.
get that like vibe from him.
Yeah. I also wrote too really quickly. I wrote, what's his name? My favorite quote from him, the one guy who's always like yelling on the sidelines, not McMahon.
Jerry the King Lawler.
Jerry
I
the
was
King
gonna
Lawler.
I was gonna ask, all right, hit me with your favorite Jerry the King Lawler line. I actually wrote down mine also.
Is it is it there's always room for one more?
Yes. So
So,
okay. So Jerry the King Lawler, if you watched our episode last week, was going in on Jake the Snake Roberts, because
oh my
they
God.
are also going to have a match at this pay-per-view.
Okay.
So there is a kind of a like a reason why he won't stop, because it keeps the feud going while Jerry the King Lawler is like sitting on commentary and not in your day-to-day like wrestler promo. But again, I just love that Jake the Snake is nowhere to be found on this episode. Not
Not a
even
here, not a there,
not
not a
once
nowhere.
did he appear. Was he discussed by anybody else? But Jerry, just being ruthless, just being the color commentator that he is, just was like, hold on, just give me like 1 second. I'm not done with this man's yet. And you're just like, it's
I
so
was like,
good.
leave him alone. And then he was like, should we have him come out and guest commentate? There's always room for one more. And then I was like,
I'm done.
losing my mind. It was so funny.
I mean, he's so brilliant. I love that man. And like later on, he gets very you'll see, he gets very 12-year-old boy, which is like, it is what it is. You'll I'm very interested to see kind of a like woman's perspective on how women get like kind of introduced into the WWE and the role that they kind of have, because they go very much from being like on the sidelines to kind of like trickling into kind of being wrestlers, and it's not an easy, it is not an easy nor a quick transition.
That was going to be a question I had, because I was like, obviously the wrestling we watch today, there's like women like
Right.
wrestling each other.
Right, and very
And
much
I
featured part of the show. Yes.
yeah, and it's like legit. And now I was like, wait a minute, I haven't seen like one woman. Like obviously women have been in it partaking on the sidelines like as managers or whatever. But I was
Right.
like, I just realized like we haven't seen like a women's match. So is that not, that's not a thing
There
yet?
right now there is like no women's division. Like it doesn't exist.
Wow. Oh
And
my God.
even when we start getting kind of more like female wrestlers, it's really only like a small handful of them. So it's less like a division and more just kind of like these like six wrestlers kind of just like getting kind of shoved together and like being like, okay, here, go do a match. And it also, WWE has like a tendency to kind of focus on models that
Mm,
become wrestlers, that will later become wrestlers, but they're very much like when they bring them on, their like purpose is to be like eye candy.
heard.
Like, and that's kind of like the role that they get brought onto. And it's really not until like later on that like they kind of start like sneaking their way, and like they kind of more and more kind of introduce more intricate stuff into their matches where it's not just them like cat fighting over each other for like
Mm,
and it kind of like they kind of sneakily have to kind of impress everybody, if you know what I mean, because
heard.
they're not given a lot of screen time if they're not in a kind of like eye candy role. But I'm very interested to see kind of like your take on that stuff, because it's an interesting journey. And you're going to see a lot of kind of female characters like come and go, some great, some very are here for a second, gone the next. I'm very intrigued to kind of see just like your take on it. I know my take on it, but I'm a dude who's been watching this forever. So
Word.
all right, so let's go into your favorite match of the night, your least favorite match of the night, and then we'll kind of talk about what is to come next week, which I think is going to be a kind of slightly more exciting episode than we got this week. But yeah, go ahead. Okay, favorite match on the card.
Definitely the second one. And I was going to say, it's so interesting we were talking about it because, like, they're not like big players yet, like, in
Right.
terms of their character or who they are. But because they're just so good, that
Mm-hmm.
just watching the actual acrobatics of it and like the physicalness of it, like, it was just so engaging. Like, I just could not stop. Like, I was just like, I had chills. I was like watching it. When I wrote down when Savio Vega flipped out of the ring and just landed on his feet. Like he like ran into the hawk and he like did some sort of like kick something, and then he
Oh,
flipped over the top rope and just
right.
landed on his feet. And I was like, "Oh my God." Like, and there were so many moments like that. And especially too, like, I don't remember, I think one of them was like bouncing back and forth off the ring, and then like I think it was the hawk just like stuck his foot up and like just kicked him like straight in
Oh,
the face. I was like, this is so good. Like, and even though like you said they're not like huge names, because they're both so good, it was like, to me, the most engaging match for
of the
sure.
card of the night. All right, and then
Yeah, that
now
was my favorite.
your least favorite.
The first one. I'm
It's
sorry.
I know, I get it. I'm there with you. I don't want to be like belabor the point, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I understand. But it is very much kind of like the passing of the guard. Like
Yeah.
that kind of style of wrestling is on its way out.
Heard.
Because we are now kind of past the point of like, oh, like here's a character, like have them fight. We have to start like thinking about like kind of start getting into like longer term like storytelling, where it's like they kind of like, they have characters kind of interact briefly, and then there's kind of like minor altercations, and it builds over time and it builds over time
I
until
love
you're
it.
like, I cannot wait to see these people like absolutely destroy each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The first one was kind of, I love Owen Hart. He is so talented.
Mm-hmm.
um but there's only so much he can do when he's facing somebody who's very limited as far as like his in-ring ability, and how much he's really willing to give Owen and kind of what he can do with it. I agree with you there. All right, so next week we are going to have two titles on the line. At this pay-per-view coming up, Shawn Michaels and Ahmed Johnson are going to team up with Psycho Sid. But next week on Monday Night Raw, both of their titles, both the WWF like World Championship and the Intercontinental Championship held by Michaels and Ahmed respectively. So Michaels is going to be facing Billy Gunn, and Ahmed Johnson is going to face Bart Gunn, and Billy Gunn and Bart Gunn are like a tag team. They are currently managed by Sonny. And
heard.
I'm very intrigued for the Shawn Michaels and Billy Gunn match, mostly because of what I know about them like going forward. Like they will be very close later on down the line.
Word. Okay.
All right, guys. So that is this week's episode of the New to Wrestling podcast. Join us next week when we watch the July 15th, 1996 episode of Monday Night Raw, which is going to feature Shawn Michaels versus Billy Gunn for the World Wrestling Federation Championship and Ahmed Johnson versus Bart Gunn for the Intercontinental Championship. We're also going to see kind of a lot of stuff leading up to the In Your House pay-per-view. And we should also have a promo from The Undertaker, which was promised to us this week, which we did not get due to time constraints. So I'm always excited when I get to see The Undertaker do his thing. All right, thank you for joining me. And I will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.